You know what's funny about karma? It doesn't send you a warning. It doesn't show up loud. It just shows up. And when it does, it hits different. I got humiliated at my own graduation, in front of everyone, by a group of kids who thought their last names made them untouchable. And for a long time, I believed them. I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I was nothing. 20 years later, one of their sons sat across from me in a job interview, nervous, sweating, hoping I wouldn't remember. I remembered everything. This is not a story about revenge. I need you to understand that right away. This is a story about what happens when you take the worst moment of your life and turn it into fuel. Real fuel. The kind that doesn't run out. If you've ever been looked down on, laughed at, or made to feel small by people who thought they were better than you just because of money or a family name, this one's for you. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you is going to hit close to home. And by the end of it, you're going to see your own situation completely differently. And hey, if stories like this are your thing, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this channel is built for people who know what it feels like to be underestimated. We drop content like this all the time, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Hit subscribe, and let's get into it. Let me take you back. Small town, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. And more importantly, everybody knows whose family has money and whose doesn't. I grew up on the working side of that town. My dad fixed cars. My mom cleaned houses. Not because she wanted to, but because that's what kept the lights on. We weren't poor in the dramatic movie sense. We had food. We had a roof. But we didn't have the kind of name that opened doors around there. And in a small town, that matters more than people want to admit. School was fine for the most part. I kept my head down, did my work, stayed out of trouble. I wasn't the most popular kid, but I had my people. A small circle, enough to get by. But there was this group, you know the type. The kids who drove cars their parents bought them at 16. The ones who wore clothes that cost more than my dad made in a week. The ones who never got in trouble no matter what they did, because their parents were on the school board or owned half the businesses downtown. There were about 5 of them. But the one who made my life the hardest, I'll call him Brandon, because I'm not here to put real names out. Brandon was the worst. Smart enough to be cruel in ways that didn't look obvious. He never hit anyone. He didn't need to. He used words, looks, laughter. He had a way of making you feel invisible and exposed at the same time. Like you were too small to be seen, but just visible enough to be laughed at. And for some reason, I was his favorite target. It started small. A comment here, a joke there. The kind of stuff that, if you said something about it, adults would tell you to toughen up. Boys will be boys. He's just messing around. You know how it goes. So I stayed quiet. I thought if I just kept my head down long enough, it would stop. It didn't stop. By junior year, it had turned into something I couldn't ignore anymore. They started calling me the help. A dig at my mom's job. They'd walk past me in the hall and say things like, "Don't forget to clean up after yourself." Or, "Make sure the bathrooms are stocked." Little things, constant things, the kind of thing that builds up over time until you start to hear it even when nobody's saying it. I started dreading going to school. Not because of the classes, I actually liked learning. I was good at it. Math, especially. Numbers made sense to me in a way people didn't. But getting there, walking those halls, sitting in that cafeteria, that was the hard part. My parents didn't know how bad it was. I didn't tell them. They had enough going on. The last thing I wanted was to add my problems to theirs. So I just held it. All of it. Every comment, every laugh, every moment I had to pretend I didn't hear what I heard. I held it tight and I kept moving. And I told myself, just get through it. Just get to graduation. After that, you're out of here. Graduation was supposed to be my moment, the finish line. 4 years of keeping my head down, staying focused, blocking out the noise. And I had actually done something with it. I was graduating with honors, top of my class in math. I had a partial scholarship to a state university. Nothing fancy, but he was mine. I earned it with no help from anybody. That day was supposed to feel like proof. Proof that it was worth it. That I was worth it. Instead, it became the moment I've spent 20 years trying to make mean something different. Here's what happened. The graduation ceremony was outside, on the school's football field. It was one of those perfect early summer days. Warm, but not hot. A little breeze. The kind of weather that makes everything feel more important than it is. Parents were in the stands. Everyone was dressed up. There was music playing. It felt like things were finally about to change. When they called my name to walk up and get my diploma, I was ready. I'd practiced the walk in my head 100 times. I was going to shake the principal's hand, hold that diploma up, and just breathe. Just let it land. I got about halfway across the stage when I heard it. Laughter. Not just one person. A group. Loud enough that heads turned. Brandon and his crew were sitting in the front section, close enough to the stage that everyone could see them. And they were laughing. Pointing. One of them had made a little sign. I still don't know how they got it past the teachers. And it said something I'm not going to repeat here. But it was about my family, about my mom's job, designed to hit exactly where they knew it would hurt. The principal didn't stop the ceremony. A few teachers looked over and did nothing. The moment I'd been working toward for 4 years was hijacked in about 15 seconds by 5 kids who thought it was funny. I kept walking. I took my diploma. I shook the principal's hand. I sat back down. And I didn't cry. Not there. I wasn't going to give them that. But something shifted in me that day. Something quiet and deep and permanent. It wasn't anger exactly. Anger burns hot and burns out. This was something colder, slower, more patient. I made a decision sitting in that plastic folding chair with my diploma in my lap and the sound of their laughter still ringing in my ears. I was going to build something. I didn't know what yet. I didn't have a plan. I just knew that one day this town was going to look at me differently. And when that day came, I wanted to be ready. I had no idea it would take 20 years. And I had no idea that when it finally happened, it would happen the way it did. With one of their kids sitting across from me, asking me for a job. But we're not there yet. I left that town 3 days after graduation, packed everything I owned into 2 bags, said goodbye to my parents, and got on a bus headed to the university. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye to anyone from school. There was nothing to say goodbye to. The scholarship covered tuition. Barely. I worked nights at a 24-hour convenience store to cover rent and food. I slept maybe 5 hours a night, some weeks less. I remember eating the same thing for days straight because it was cheap. and I didn't have time to think about food. But I want to be honest with you. Those years were not miserable. I know that sounds strange given everything I just described, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Nobody in that city knew my name. Nobody knew my mom cleaned houses or that my dad worked on cars. I was just a guy with a notebook and a backpack and a quiet kind of hunger that I couldn't fully explain yet. I started doing well in my classes almost immediately. Not just well, really well. My math professor pulled me aside after the first exam and asked me if I'd considered graduate school. I laughed. Graduate school wasn't something people from my neighborhood talked about. It felt like something from a different world. But the idea stuck. I didn't go to grad school right away. After I graduated, I took a job at a mid-sized logistics company doing data analysis. Boring work on paper, moving numbers around, finding patterns in shipping routes and supply chains. But I was good at it, really good. And more importantly, I started seeing something that the people above me weren't seeing. There were massive inefficiencies in the way small regional businesses were managing their supply chains. Not because they were dumb, but because the tools available to them were built for big corporations. Nobody had built something for the small guys, the local businesses, the family-owned operations. I saw a gap, a real one. I spent 2 years saving money and another year building a software tool in my apartment after work. Just me, a laptop, and a lot of bad coffee. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my coworkers, not my parents. I was terrified of failing out loud. So I just worked in silence. The first version of the product was rough, really rough, but I got 3 small businesses to try it for free. And within 4 months, all 3 of them told me it had saved them more money than they'd spent on anything else that year. That was the moment I knew. I quit my job on a Tuesday morning, told my boss I was leaving. He looked at me like I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe he was right. But I'd been making safe choices my whole life, and they hadn't exactly been working out. I took every dollar I had saved and put it into the company. The first 2 years were brutal. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. There were months where I didn't know if I could keep the lights on. I lost clients. I made bad hires. I made decisions that cost me time and money that I didn't have. There were nights where I sat in my office, which was just a corner of my apartment, and genuinely wondered if I was crazy for doing this. But then something started to happen. The product got better. The word spread. Not through ads or big marketing campaigns. I couldn't afford that. It spread because the businesses using it kept telling other businesses about it. Small town owners, regional distributors, family operations that had been struggling for years suddenly had a tool that actually fit the way they worked. By year 3, I had a real team. 12 people, an actual office, a product that was growing faster than I could keep up with. By year 5, we were operating in 4 states. By year 10, I was the largest employer in my industry in the entire region. And then, and this is the part that still gets me when I think about it, we expanded back into my home state. And not just into the state, into the region. And not just into the region, back into the town. It wasn't a calculated revenge move. I want to be clear about that. The business opportunity was real. The area was underserved. The market made sense, and my team had been pushing to expand in that direction for over a year. The numbers made the decision, not my emotions. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that felt something when I signed those papers. We opened the regional office on a Thursday in March. Nothing fancy. A press release, a ribbon cutting, a write-up in the local paper. I flew in for the opening, walked around the space, shook some hands, did some interviews. And then I went and got dinner at a diner I used to go to as a kid. Sat in the same booth I used to sit in with my dad on Sunday mornings. Ordered the same thing, and I just sat there for a minute. 20 years. That's how long it had been since I sat in that plastic chair on that football field, with my diploma in my lap and the sound of laughter in my ears. 20 years since I left, with 2 bags and a quiet kind of rage that I'd somehow turned into a company that employed over 300 people. I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt something more complicated than that. Like something had finally closed. Like a door that had been left open for a long time had quietly clicked shut. I drove past my old high school on the way back to the hotel. Didn't stop. Just looked at it through the window. It looked smaller than I remembered. Everything did. The next morning, the hiring process for the new office began. We had posted about 40 positions. Everything from entry-level operations roles to mid-level management. The applications came in fast. The town didn't have a ton of high-paying job options, so the opening was a big deal locally. My HR team was sorting through hundreds of resumes within the first week. I wasn't involved in the day-to-day hiring. That's not my job anymore. I have people for that. But for the regional office launch, I'd asked to personally sit in on a few of the final round interviews for the senior positions, just to get a feel for the local talent, make sure the right people were leading the new team. My assistant sent me the interview schedule on a Wednesday night. I was scrolling through the names on my phone, not thinking much of it, when I stopped. One of the names. I read it twice, then a third time. It was Brandon's last name. Not Brandon, his son. Same last name. Applied for a senior operations manager role. 26 years old based on the resume. Strong application, actually. Good school, decent experience. Made the final round on merit. I put my phone down. I sat with that for a long time. I thought about a lot of things in that moment. About that graduation day. About the sign. About the laughter. About the teachers who looked away. About the principal who kept going like nothing happened. About the 15-year-old version of me who held all of it in because he didn't want to be a burden. And then I thought about who I was now, what I'd built, what it had taken to get here. And I made a decision about how I was going to walk into that interview room, real quick. If this story is hitting you the way I think it is, drop something in the comments. Anything. Tell me what you think I did in that interview room. Did I give him the job? Did I shut the door in his face? I want to know what you think happened. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This is exactly the kind of content we put out here every single week. Hit subscribe and let's finish this story. The morning of the interview, I woke up early, not because I was nervous. I haven't been nervous before a meeting in a long time. I woke up early because I couldn't stop thinking. My brain was running through everything at once. The past, the present, what I was about to walk into. And sleep just wasn't happening. I got up, made coffee, sat by the window of the hotel room and watched the town wake up. It's a strange thing, going back to a place that shaped you. Everything looks familiar, but nothing feels the same. The streets are the same streets. The buildings are mostly the same buildings. But you are not the same person who left. And that gap between the place staying the same and you being completely different, that's a weird thing to sit inside of. I thought about my dad. He passed 6 years ago. Heart attack, sudden, no warning. One of the hardest things I've ever gone through. He never got to see what the company became. He saw the early days, saw me struggling, saw me grinding, told me he was proud of me, even when I had nothing to show for it yet. But he didn't get to see this, didn't get to see me come back to this town as the guy who built something real. I thought about my mom. She's still here, actually. Still in the same house I grew up in. She doesn't clean houses anymore. I took care of that a long time ago. She gardens now, grows tomatoes, calls me every Sunday. She doesn't fully understand what the company does, but she cuts out every newspaper article that mentions my name and puts them in a folder. She has a whole drawer full of them. I thought about all of that sitting by that hotel window with my coffee going cold. And then I got dressed and went to do the interview. The office was still being set up. Boxes everywhere, new furniture, that fresh paint smell. My team had put together a temporary interview space in the back. Clean, professional, nothing fancy. I got there about 20 minutes before the first candidate, reviewed the files, got a cup of water, talked to my HR lead for a few minutes about what we were looking for, and then they brought him in. I want to describe this moment carefully because I've thought about it a lot since it happened. He walked in and I saw it immediately, that flicker. That split second where he looked at me and something moved behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or something close to it. He would have been around 6 or 7 years old when I left this town. He might not have known exactly who I was, but he knew the name, I could tell. In a small town, names carry weight across generations. He was nervous, genuinely nervous. Not in a guilty way, just in a this matters to me way. He was dressed sharp, had clearly prepared. He sat down across from me, introduced himself, gave a firm handshake. And here's the thing that got me. He was good. Not just okay, actually good. He answered every question thoughtfully. He knew the industry. He had real ideas about operations and efficiency that showed he'd done his homework. He wasn't coasting on his last name. He wasn't entitled or arrogant. He was just a young guy who wanted the job and had put in the work to deserve a real shot at it. I asked him at one point, and this was not on the standard list of questions. I asked him, "What do you know about where this company started?" He looked at me, thought about it, and then he said something I didn't expect. He said, "I know you're from here. I know you left and built something most people from this town couldn't even imagine. And honestly, that's part of why I applied. I figured if someone from here could build this, maybe there's room for someone else from here to be part of it." He didn't know I knew his father. Or if he did, he didn't bring it up. I looked at him for a moment, just a beat longer than normal. And then I moved on to the next question. After the interview, I sat alone in that room for a few minutes, just thinking. I had spent a lot of years, more than I want to admit, carrying that graduation day around with me. Not consciously, not every day, but it was there. Underneath everything, That feeling of being laughed at in front of everyone at the one moment that was supposed to be yours. That's not something you just shake off. But sitting in that room, I realized something. The weight was gone. Not because I'd gotten revenge. Not because I'd proven something to Brandon or to anyone who was in those stands that day. But because somewhere along the way, without me fully noticing, I had become someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The company proved it. The 300 jobs proved it. My mom's garden and her drawer full of newspaper clippings proved it. I didn't need that graduation moment to be different. It already was different. I had rewritten what it meant by everything I did after it. So what did I do? I gave him the job. And I want to explain why, because I think this is the most important part of the whole story. I gave him the job because he earned it. Full stop. He was the best candidate for that role. My company needed the right person in that position, and removing him from consideration because of something his father did when I was 17 years old would have made me exactly the kind of person I'd spent my whole life refusing to become. It would have made me Brandon. That thought hit me hard when it landed, because that's the thing about carrying old wounds into new situations. If you're not careful, the hurt turns you into the thing that hurt you. You start making decisions based on ego and pain instead of reality. And I hadn't come this far, worked this hard, built this much, to let a man I hadn't seen in 20 years still be making my decisions for me. So yeah, he got the job. He's been with the company for about 2 years now. He's good at it. Shows up early, works hard, takes feedback well. Nothing like his father, as far as I can tell. I never told him about any of this. It's not his story to carry. But Brandon himself, I did run into him, about 6 months after the office opened. Saw him at a gas station of all places. He looked older, tired. Life had clearly not gone the way he probably assumed it would when he was 17 and untouchable. The family money had thinned out. A few bad business decisions, from what I heard around town. He recognized me. I could see it, and I watched him do that thing people do when they're not sure whether to acknowledge something or pretend it didn't happen. He chose to acknowledge it. He walked over, said my name, said congratulations on the company, that it was a really big deal for the town. Said it seemed like things had really worked out for me. I looked at him, and I just said, "Yeah, they did." No speech. No, "Do you remember what you did?" No dramatic moment. Just those 3 words. Because the truth is, I didn't need anything from him. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Not even recognition of what happened. I used to think I did. I used to think that the moment would feel incomplete without some kind of acknowledgement from the people who caused it. But standing there at that gas station, I realized the moment had been complete for a long time. I just hadn't noticed because I'd been too busy building. We went our separate ways. I got in my car, I drove back to the office, and that was it. No fireworks, no breakdown. No big dramatic ending. Just a guy from a small town who got laughed at once, decided it wasn't gonna be the last word, and spent 20 years making sure it wasn't. If you take anything from this story, take this. The people who underestimate you are not your enemies. They're your fuel. Every laugh, every comment, every moment someone looked at you like you were nothing, that's yours. You get to decide what you do with it. You can let it shrink you, or you can let it drive you. I chose to let it drive me, and I'm still driving. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to the channel right now. There are more stories like this one coming, and you don't want to miss them.